there was much about the body. Again, that's a change for sure. That we just didn't talk about. You didn't even talk to other people about when you got your period. I mean, it's really a sense of self-censoring and a kind of repressed environment that we didn't realize was that. And that book was absolutely radical for me and others. In fact, I should tell you that I've been married like lots of times, and and my current husband is the keeper. He's a feminist. He's definitely my life partner. And when I first went to his house when we met, he had a copy of Our Bodies Are Ourselves on his bookshelf. So that's it. That's it. I can tell you my other husbands did not. But there was no history. There were no women's studies courses. There was no real discussion about gender awareness in any kind of intellectual, social, historical way. And there was some literature on the suffragette movement. Obviously, there had been plays. There was a literature and a fictional literature about that movement, some of it quite derisive. But, there was literature of it, and that was kind of it. And what started to emerge in my life, was in film studies, were films made about women during World War II. And that was kind of my consciousness of what had happened. When the men were out fighting, women had to run the factories and build the equipment and became very empowered. The whole Rosie Riveter phenomenon and all of that really shook up society. And through film, through very, very strong women, and strong, very self-confident women, confident about their sexuality, confident about their dress, Katharine Hepburn and all the heroines of the 30s and 40s, that was the social history we were getting. It wasn't through the books. There were no books. There was Simone de Beauvoir's Second Sex, but it wasn't translated really until very late. So unless you were reading in French, for English-speaking and English readers, North America, there was a lot left out. But it started to burst, it all burst in this moment. That's what happened. What we liked in the film festival board when we saw this film was that it was a fabulous opportunity to provide that line of continuity, a whole social history. Your audience, this is what made you, this is what came before you. There's a kind of cliche about anybody who's successful or is making change or doing something transformative stands on the shoulders of all those people who came before. And that's very much the way this film positions the current moment as its inheritance of all that bloody hard work that those women did. Very, very heroic, really, but out of necessity. It wasn't like they felt brave. They were just doing it as a kind of survival gesture more than anything else. When I was involved in the rather dramatic opening of the abortion clinic here in the late 80s, I got a call from a woman who's of this vintage. She's not alive anymore. Great woman, great, second wave feminist, who everybody admired. She was involved in municipal politics and lots of social action work in the community. But she called me up and she said, you shouldn't be involving the St. John's Status of Women Council. Well, first she said, are you crazy? You're in Newfoundland, you are crazy. Step away, do not go there. It's just doomed. It's an absolutely doomed project. Choice here is going to have to wait until that happens. Abortion clinic, out of the question. That is crazy. And the second thing she said was, why are you involving or getting involved in the St. John's Status Women Council? Those women are all lesbians. This, goes back to this, whoa, what is that all about? And I said, I told her to fuck off politely, really, but, because I did respect her, but this kind of abyss opened up. And I thought, oh, I'm not that kind of feminist, anymore. That's not my world anymore. It pointed out how many divisions there were in the community here. That was a really interesting lesson for me, because I was way too Pollyanna. I was walking around like Pollyanna thinking, we can, and you gotta have that view to make change, right? If you started thinking about all the opposition out there, you'd kill yourself. So, I just ignored it. But wow, that was a really interesting moment for me, because I realized how much difference there was in the community. And today, if it's not, too outrageous a statement, that abortion clinic is thriving. There's a lot of demand, and has never stopped being in business. So, she never did say, I shouldn't have said that, and I never said I told you so. We sort of kept our respectful distance after that. But, it's a kind of paradox, because I so admired the work she had done, even though she was speaking of a different generation, and her fears came out of a different time. And to some degree, she had been in the community long enough and had scar tissue from just trying to make change. So it's hard to be generous when somebody is telling you, you're wrong, you're stupid, you shouldn't go near those lesbians. But on the other hand, I kind of got that, okay, that's where she was coming from, and I got it. I got where she was coming from. But it was a good question, and it kind of made me ramble a bit, but that's why these films are so important, I think. Yeah.
But actually, I just wanted to continue this thought, because a few of us were having this conversation just a few minutes ago about what the milestones are within our local scene.
Yeah.
Whether there is a place to tap into that history, especially for those of us who've been born away or not that aware of what's gone on. Like that story I hadn't heard personally.
Yeah,
so
there's a lot of stories.
Are there other moments that really strike you?
Oh, absolutely. Well, the book you're reading now, it's, what is it? Our Stories, Our Times?
Their Lives and Times?
Our Lives and Times. So I have a chapter in there about the opening of the abortion clinic, which is no doubt the absolutely scariest day of my life. No doubt. I felt my life was threatened. There were over 400 people bussed in from various communities all over Atlantic Canada, mostly men, who wanted to kill me and Henry Morgentaler. And I had done the stealth work on the clinic with Henry to control the media. So I was kind of the media person for that. And it's like totally scary. But we had undercover our RNC helping us. And that was fantastic. So, in fact, one of them, Bob Johnson, ended up becoming chief of police. And, we bonded for the last 25 years. Every time I'd see him, it was like abortion clinic, It was like, life is funny here, the way it throws you, into relationships you never thought were possible or anticipated. But you should read that book. It's a collection of events, a whole history of really, the women's movement here. A very important moment was when, I don't remember the dates of it now, it's all kind of fuzzy, but around the same time, there were a whole group of us who occupied the federal office downtown at the, I think it was Atlantic Place, of the department, the unit in which the Status of Women office was subsumed under that larger federal government office. And we took it over, so we had kind of a sleep-in, and it was totally shocking. At all these federal workers in the office, because the feds had cut the funding to all of the Status of Women councils across the country, and some had to shut down. And that Status of Women council, full of lesbians, was absolutely, I would do anything for those women because of how they helped the day that the abortion clinic opened and went public. They were the toughest broads on the universe. And they had call trees, safe trees, phone lines, trees, all pre-technology, And they were like an army. You had to go through them to get anywhere, that you wanted to go. And they were like my protectors. So, I was more than happy to go to a sleep-in at that office to protect those women in that council for all the work they were doing. And the whole history of that council in St. John's is yet to be fully told, and it's ongoing, because it was that council that was really offering a kind of social service at every level. Women coming in from, you name the class and orientation, going to the Status Women Council because there was no counseling service for them, no safe place to go. If they were being abused or there was domestic violence, they would go there to find out where to go. They were really at the coalface in the 70s, the 60s, 70s, 80s, and today, I'm sure they're doing much of the same good work, although there are other services in place to reinforce that. So that's a really important part of local social history for sure. But you can, a good researcher or even a weak researcher would easily stumble upon, with a little bit of archival work through the Telegram, say it would be really interesting to go back and trace through the decade. Of course, it speaks a lot to what might have been represented or not in the Telegram, but you get some kind of cross-section or slice of the kind of protests or concerns or demonstrations, the kind of struggles, the kind of fights that happen with city councils and with all levels of government about various issues. But it's a very good question. I'd say read that book. It's full of really good essays by all the women who have really helped make this community, women who, have just as important role as the women in this film in making Newfoundland, and certainly in this town and in Corner Brook too, a place where women would feel empowered, for sure.
What was it called?
I keep forgetting.
I think it's called Their Lives and Times.
Their Lives and Times, yeah.
Edited
It's
by
a big anthology, lots of essays in there.
edited by Barbara Neese and Carmelita McGrath.
Yeah, they co-edited, Barbara Neese and Carmelita McGrath. And it's a real good cross-section of exactly what you might be looking for.
At the Munn Library.
Thank you. Do you think in all your organizing and in everything that you've done, do you think that were there responses and resistances and that are unique specifically to this place and to Newfoundland?
Oh, yeah.
That you encountered a lot?
Yeah, well, some are really comical. I'm bored of my job too, right? So I come here and the first thing I'm doing is helping the abortion clinic. So there's the whole outside, inside thing.
Yeah.
And so my phone number is in the book, it was in the phone book. And so I got a lot of hate mail, I got calls, and the RCMP had to protect me for 6 weeks because of death threats, and I had somebody undercover at MUN inside my office, because I'd come in the morning and there'd be all kinds of hate stuff, and my picture, with stuff going through my body, and all that. So I didn't disconnect my phone, but I didn't get that many calls at home. So I decided not to do that, because it's just such a hassle in those days. This is before digital communication. So I need my phone. And this guy calls up one night, I'm having supper, and he said something like, some old guy, are you very young? Yeah, I said, yeah. And he said, how can you call yourself a Christian? And I said, well, I'm not. And he was completely baffled. That can only happen here. He had no idea that there could be anybody who was not a Christian. So I didn't say I'm Jewish or I'm whatever. I just said I'm not. And there was this long silence. And that sort of ended the conversation. Where I thought it was going to go. But there was a layering for a long time of denominational spite and lots of stuff informing, certainly the Catholic Church was, not just because of the whole choice movement, but because of, priesthood, women, and there were all these women, they're not in this film, but contemporaries of Millet, Brown Miller, and others, who were writing about the patriarchal nature of the Roman Catholic Church, and very, very outspoken and very, very radical women. And, church hasn't really changed very much since then. But that was informing a lot of the criticism that we had, and a lot of the very confident voices talking about us as women being, disrespectful of authority. So I think that happened here. It happened in Quebec too, for the same reasons. But in Quebec, that's it, quiet revolution, just put an end to all that, church collapse. The interesting social moment here is that the exposure of the abuse at Mount Cashel Orphanage, which is actually preceded by an Anglican version of the same thing. If anybody was around long enough, or your parents would certainly know about it. There was a really well-meaning, very well-liked guy who worked with the Anglican Church, who was revealed to, and he was a friend of one of my husband's families, and so I knew all that. And it was a really big deal, very exposed. That all happened the year the abortion clinic opened. So the church here went, its moral authority was undermined radically by the exposure of what happened at Mount Cashel, and then in other denominational situations of the same nature. So that the timing couldn't have been better. Henry Morgenthaler did not plan that, but that's what happened. Because the Archbishop at the time, Archbishop Penny, was marching against the clinic that day it opened. And all of this stuff was just starting to leak out about Mount Cashel. And so that's what I would characterize very much as a local effect that I felt. It would be interesting to really open this up more fully, like what's happening in Spaniards Bay is not unique to Spaniards Bay. I'm sure in rural communities all over the country, the same thing might be happening. At least it's curious to say, I'd like to think so, that it's not just Newfoundland where you have that kind of resistance, or ignorance, whatever. But I wonder, what is the local stuff, like how would you characterize that, if it is locally informed, right? Is it small town? Is it, sense of isolation, very defensive? What is it? What is it? Is there something Newfoundland about that? I don't know the answer to that question.
I noticed that the instance in Spaniards Bay kind of mirrored instances a few years ago of actual sexual assaults that happened in small rural football communities. There's this idea of like masculinity, our boys, heroes. Yeah. So maybe in certain communities they just feel like if they shame any important member of the community, then the whole community has a whole of shame. Like they over-identify with people they believe hold a position of authority or power, or who's a respectful person in their community. Because if that person is shamed or shunned, then they themselves too are well. Or even families, years ago, like you mentioned, the orphanage and stuff like that. If a family member did something terrible to the family, was kept within the family, hush hush, often put under the rug.
Yeah.
Same with
for
people
sure.
experiencing religious abuse and what have you. Is because people did not want to be, I guess, guilty by association or proximity.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. And not to mention firefighters who are heroes.
Yeah.
And volunteer fire. So yeah, there's a lot of shame involved in that, and sort of exposing them, these people you revere, as being less than ideal. Is somebody behind you?
Yeah, one of the things that I thought of while I was watching the film is just what does feminism or what does the women's movement look like in rural communities, so I guess it's a good time to talk about it. It's Spaniards Bay in particular, but I don't think that's a problem unique to Spaniards Bay or Newfoundland or, any particular part of the country. So I guess one of the things that I'm thinking about is how do we organize outside of St. John's or even outside of Cornerbrook, and what has that looked like in the past in Newfoundland and Labrador, if you have any experience with it, because I think if we're gonna build, rural
Yeah,
broad-based movement, it has to be outside of like urban centers. And those issues are so totally different in rural communities too. So how do you connect with people when you haven't lived many of their experiences?
yeah, it's not easy. Usually things get galvanized around causes or events, right? Just otherwise, I mean, I'm sure that in many communities in Newfoundland and Labrador, women are getting together. Women are enlightened and all that, and have their ways of offering, solidarity to each other. So there, depends what are you looking for? What's the goal of that? As with these women, you start local, you start small, and you have to, I mean, technologically it's so much easier to connect with other people. But you gotta find who are the champions or who are the connectors in those places. It was much easier when there was a great big cause of all the status of women councils across the country, including those on the island, so that suddenly we were connected to all of those groups, and we had a movement going on the island. So that was, unique to that event. And today, again, this whole notion that there's no obvious problem, except that Spaniards Day has exposed some thinking that is clearly a problem and might be more pervasive. But how do you get at that, right? I don't have an answer, but I'm a firm believer in, organize around yourselves in the world you know. Start with that. And that's out of that things grow. Don't take on too much.
I'd be pretty curious about that question too. I think it's really hard to reach out to people who are from a community to come from.
Yeah.
And that people have to organize from within their communities, and it's really problematic to go into the community and try and
Save them.
But I was interested in the movie in the ways that people were reaching out to communities they weren't part of. And I think to know how to do that is a really valuable skill.
Yeah.
To say, hey, this exists.
Yeah.
Take it or leave it.
Yeah.
But that would be something that I would love to have more conversation about.
Yeah, it's easier in big cities, in big urban spaces to do that.
Yeah.
There's lots of fallback, or there are options. But it's difficult to parachute yourself in somewhere.
And maybe it's maybe just having, media exposure where people in isolated communities are able to see what's happening and say, okay, that does make sense, or, and then reach out.
Yeah. Well, building a conference or a workshop or doing the stuff we're trying to do at the festival gets, some exposure. You might think about that question, about how to evolve beyond the city and something like that, It's our challenge at the festival too. It's the St. John's International Women's Film Festival, but, we've got films on the go, we're trying to shop the stuff around, trying to expose other people to the kind of films that we're showing. It's a challenge of our geography and scale.
And I mean, even reaching out to communities within St. John's that there are lots of different socioeconomic groups.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, we talk about this all the time, about how do we build our audience, how do we diversify our audience? That's the real challenge, And I think it's changed a lot. Men never went to the festival when I began the festival. There's one guy who used to go, he was a cameraman. And he was like Nigel Martin, he went to the festival. It took about 6 years until another guy came. And now the audiences are completely equal or fair, almost 50-50. To most of them, to most of the big events anyhow. And you have to start, I think, modestly, or at least realistically, practical. Otherwise, you just burn out. You lose your focus. Anything else about the film struck people? Somebody was listening.
I
not so much as a question, but like a comment, like what you said really resonated with me about like, you don't say progress, you say change, because watching the film, like a couple of us were kind of like exchanging looks and laughing, because these are all things that we are
Exactly.
still talking
Exactly.
about. So I thought that like you really articulated that really well.
Yeah, sometimes people are shocked when I say that, but I don't really believe in progress. And I think things have changed, things have gotten easier, we figured out ways of managing some of our problems. We have clean running water, well, sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. Some communities do, some communities don't. But I'm not so sure, human nature or civilization, such as it's really changed very much. We just learned how to live better, have better quality of life. But I don't see, when you look, again, at the world, there's a lot of evidence of people stopping to kill each other or be barbaric or abuse people. I'm sure, like me, you have these moments. I have them sometimes far too often when I'm just, involuntarily thinking about something, and I think somewhere in the world, really bad shit is going on in far too many places. Really horrible stuff. Somebody is being tortured, somebody's being killed, some woman is being raped. Like every single moment that I am living, that has happened. It's overwhelming to deal with. So, because I think about that, I can't believe in progress. But that doesn't, I believe in working for change. Anything else? That kind of sober moment. Well, anyway, it's great to meet you all, such as it is, in this informal way.